My dad lived the life that he wanted to live. You know, he said early on that
when I get out of boxing or when I'm through, I'm gonna do all I can to help people.
he believed that he needed the Rolex and he needed the Rolls Royce to get people's attention, but then he was gonna spread his message and he stayed true to that.
We need somebody in the world to help us make peace.
This episode is supported by Huel.
So Laila, it's a real privilege to have you here, and we were just talking that we have common ground so my dad was a boxing coach and my playground was a boxing gym as a kid, and not only were you an incredible undefeated 4-time world champion yourself, you also had a ringside seat to the greatest boxer of all time as well, your father. So my first question is almost like, when I mention your dad's name, what's the first thoughts that come into your mind about him?
You know, it's been mentioned so many times throughout my life, you know. When someone's speaking of my father, there's the public Muhammad Ali, and then there's Dad.
Yeah.
So when you mention him the way you just did, that's public Muhammad Ali. I'm not thinking of him as Dad. It's almost like two separate people, right? Even though he's one. Because obviously you didn't know him like I did, right? Even though he was an open book, you know, for the most part, but it's still different when you're, you know, it's my dad.
Yeah,
the same blood running through my veins as he had. So, but I will say that I'm incredibly proud of the person that my father was, the man that he was, the athlete that he was, and there'll never be another like him. And all of the things that made him so great and made him so loved, I just have so much respect for.
And when you think of your dad, like, and again, if I can be selfish and sort of relate it to my dad, that I think about so many of the lessons that he taught me through life, but also through the sport as well. And I'm interested, are there any lessons that you think of that really stand out that your dad taught you that maybe you pass on to your children now?
My father did a lot of his teaching by example. Just by watching him, I learned so much, and he was very consistent. So meaning that obviously my father, wherever we went, there was always a crowd, and he loved attention. And he always say, bring it on. You know, he wanted to be noticed. He wanted to entertain. He wanted to sign autographs. He wanted to pick up babies and kiss them and shake hands and take photos for hours, right? And as a child, that wasn't always fun, right? You want to just go get something to eat at the local diner. You don't want to be stuck there for 3 hours, you know, like, oh God, the same thing every time. But I remember my father getting in the car with us when we leave, and he'd say, you know why I do that? You know why I take time, you know, to look people in their eye, because it makes them feel special. They're just so happy to see me. He would paint that picture for us. So you know, why do we have to stay for 2 hours? Because if there's a line, think about that last person that gets cut off. Sorry, I gotta go. He never wanted to cut it off. And we're like, okay, but we can't just stay here forever. What about us, you know? So, but he cared about people so much. And he always let us know that he actually was being intentional, you know, about giving back. My dad would literally sit there at his desk and sign pamphlets with his autograph, because at the worst case scenario, here is an autograph. And I do that now. You know, there's times where I take my kids to Disneyland or somewhere like that. And I'm like, you know, you want to give your children their time. It's not going to be fun for them if I stop every second and take a photo. But if I'm going to tell someone no, which inevitably you have to do sometimes, I'm sorry, I'm here with my family today, and they're understanding, here's an autograph. They at least have something. Yeah. So I'm not just like, no, you know? So something that I learned from my dad, one of the many things.
You know what, that reminds me of a story that I read. You know, like, the book Thomas Hauser wrote about your dad in 1990, like the definitive autobiography. And I think I was 14 or 15 when I read it, and there was a story that jumped out at me that sort of spoke about that private truth, where he talks about he went to a women's prison in New York, and whoever was with him tells a story of how he picked out a lady that conventionally was the most unattractive, unpleasant-looking, mean-looking lady. And your dad went out of his way to sort of go over to her and hug her and give her a kiss. And when they asked him the same question that you were inevitably asking, it was the intentionality and the goodness of him. He said, nobody will ever pay that woman, that lady, any attention. And I wanted to make her feel special.
And he wants to surprise her too. Like, you know, like, whoa, You know, he loves surprise, and they come in many different ways. But yeah, absolutely. And again, I do the same thing still now. I don't think, well, let me get the most unattractive person, but I'm saying just people who think you aren't paying attention, who think you don't care, who think, you know, you're only going to pay attention to people who can do something for you or that you want something from or something like that. And that's not the case. So, and I always hope that my children will watch me and see how you treat people, those that can't do anything for you. And I think that's how all people should be. I don't think that just celebrities or athletes or entertainers should be that way. I think that's how we all should be. We should all be kind people.
But you talk in your brilliant book, Reach, that you wrote when you were in your early 20s, when you were fighting yourself, that sometimes the frustration that you had of him as a dad, that there was always people in the house, it was an open house, and there was times where you wanted his attention just for you rather than for a public gathering. So what sort of father was he in that way?
I've always been someone who doesn't like crowds, even till now. I don't necessarily like attention. So I don't remember growing up thinking, man, I just wish I had my father's attention. I really just like privacy. You know, when you think about your childhood, whatever that may be, for most people if they grew up in their home with their parents, or, you know, you have those memories. I have memories of lots of people around all the time. So that's just part of what comes with it, though. It's not really something that I complain about, because it is what it is. You know, you're gonna have to suffer a little bit. You know, when your father's a global icon, one of the greatest men of all time, who's freeing hostages and doing all these things. And, you know, he's not gonna be able to be there for every birthday. He's not gonna be able to be there for every graduation. That's just the way that it is. So luckily, I had many other people in my life that filled in those places, and I turned out great. You know what I mean? So, but absolutely, I mean, I think that, you know, you would be, it wouldn't be true if I would say that it would have been nice to have more privacy, obviously to have both of your parents, my mom and my dad. Because nobody wants to feel abandoned. Nobody wants to feel left to figure it out for themselves, you know, but I am one of many who have had to go through it in one way, one form or the other, you know, having to figure things out for yourself. And you make a lot of mistakes along the way, you know, and you discover a lot of things about yourself, but that was definitely my life.
Yeah, then I want to talk about some of those mistakes in a while, but because there was another phrase that you used when you were talking about your childhood of, it gave you the ability to spot fakes and hangers-on and people that were there maybe for not having the right reason, for the right reasons.
I could spot them from a mile away.
So I'm interested in what was it that you spotted that allowed you to recognize the signs?
Well, I think that, you know, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it was, but when you watch people long enough, you know, there's just certain mannerisms or certain ways that people move. Let's just say it like that. So, but I mean, to me, it can be pretty obvious a lot of the time. And even though it may not be obvious to the person trying, like, you realize how long I've been, you know, dealing with this. But I think that because there were always so many people around, a lot of those people were, you know, we've heard the term yes people. They're going to say yes, 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 please. You know, they want to say what they need to say to stay around and make you happy. And that's not always what you need. Sometimes you just need someone who's going to tell you the truth, you know? And for me, I'll get offended at a certain point. I'm saying, as an adult, if you haven't had the discernment to recognize that I'm not one of those people who just want you to say yes, then you don't need to be around me anyway. You know what I'm saying? So, because I get it. There's those people who can turn it off and turn it on. Like when they think somebody needs that for their ego, they can turn it on. When they say, oh, she's good, you know, but if you can't figure that out for yourself, I'm like, okay, you're you know, you don't need to be here. But that just comes with any celebrity or someone who, you know, is wealthy or things like that. They can do things for people, or there's just people who just want to be around it. They just want to be around you, even if you can't do anything for them. You know, it's just part of it.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough once to spend time with Angelo Dundee, who trained your dad throughout his career, and he had this lovely phrase when I was talking to him about, he said, learn to spot the people in your dressing room after you've been beat, not the ones that are there after a victory, because they're the people that are there for the right reasons, that they care about you. And I'm interested in, why do you think your dad couldn't spot that in many ways, that he allowed people in through his generosity that sometimes didn't have the best of intentions for him?
Did you know that less than half of Brits eat breakfast every day of the week? I mean, that's amazing, but why? Well, it's because we're all time poor, especially in the mornings, so we compromise. My fix is Huel's nutritionally complete high-protein shake, a complete meal in a bottle that slots perfectly into my life. Head to the link in the description for a free t-shirt on your first order with Huel. How can you resist that?
My dad was someone who sometimes he would spot it, and he just would let them, he would still let them be around because he felt like there's something that they needed. Like, so for example, I know, to try to explain, I remember when my mom told me that Mercedes-Benz had given my mom and my dad a car each, two cars. And they never came. And next thing she knew, his manager and his wife were driving them. And my dad was like, it's okay, just let him have them. Like, he knew that he took the cars. Because a lot of times people give you so many different gifts, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes I do it. I'll send certain gifts to certain people, and you're like wondering, did they ever get the gift, or did their assistant or somebody receive it and take it? Because I remember thinking, that used to happen with my dad, but he let him have it anyway. Well, he needs it more than I do. So, I'm the type of person that I can never let somebody get away with that. Because I'm like, I need you to know that I know. Like, you know what I mean? So, but he wasn't that way. So I don't know. I think, and they're just such a kind-hearted person, as well. So that was an example of when I think he did see it. But a lot of times, like you said, he didn't see it. It's just when there's so much going on, right? Yeah. And that wasn't really his focus. I think it's really important, though, to have people in your corner that can do some of that for you, to weed out. But he was so strong that everyone would tell you he's going to do what he wants to do, and he's going to have around who he wants to have around for whatever reason.
Well, that brings us on to talking about the traits that you have in common with him, because he made a comment like that to you, didn't he, when you were fighting, of like, you're just like me, you're headstrong.
Definitely, I'm definitely that.
So when you look back now that you're at an age when your dad had long retired and at the same age as you now, what do you see as the common traits that you and him did share and possess?
Oh man, so many. We're alike in a lot of ways, but very different in a lot of ways also. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is confidence, leadership, dedication, perseverance, tenacity, loyalty. Those are the things, and authenticity.
Okay.
We're both very intelligent, not necessarily book smart intelligent. Anyone can read a book and memorize something,
Yeah.
But I think that those are the things that come to mind. I'm different than my dad. Number one, I'm a woman, he's a man. I'm not as friendly as my dad was.
Yeah.
I'm a nice person, but I'm not the type of person that's gonna come, gather around,
Yeah.
I'm kind of more, I'm gonna size you up and kind of, keep it moving, like I don't, but and like I said, I think that has to do with being a woman also. You have to be more guarded.
Yeah.
I can't just open myself up because people take it the wrong way. I'm a 100% amazing at putting up boundaries. So.
Well, it also sounds like you're describing the trait that you had to learn, because your parents separated when you were, was it 8 or 9?
Around that age, yeah.
Yeah, and you described that you almost had to become the protector of the family for your mother, who moved on to a different relationship with an abusive guy. So would you describe a little bit about that for us?
Well, I was always a fighter. I always had a fighting spirit. And what I mean by that is I had no fear. So a lot of times, if people get in a situation where they feel like they have to fight or defend themselves, they feel fear, right? I never felt fear. So I would never want to start something, but if something got started, it was like, what? I'm ready. So I did feel that way with my mom and my sister. And I just remember my mom was saying, Layla, like, why is this girl tough like this? Or even just trying to be strong. I remember being young and let me help you move that. And my mom's like, it's too heavy for you. I got it, see? I want to show her I'm strong. Almost like a boy would be, right? You would think. And then my mom did get remarried and she ended up marrying a guy who turned out to be just like mentally and emotionally abusive to her,
Yep.
not physically. But he was mean to us, mean to my mom, and I had to stand up for myself, and I started to look at my mom a certain way. I'm like, why are you gonna let this guy treat you like this? Why are you gonna let him treat us like this? I started losing respect for my mom. And then, it's already hard as a teenager sometimes with girls and moms, there's a little friction there. But then having somebody as strong as me and as opinionated as me and who's gonna speak her mind, and then with all that was going on, it was a lot for her, and then I ended up, having a lot of anger inside, and that didn't mix well, with being this fighter, who was angry, who felt abandoned, not only by my mom, but also by my dad, because my dad was in another state. He was busy doing his thing. This is just how I felt inside, even though at the time I couldn't verbalize it. I didn't know. I can say this now.
Yeah, sure.
So, when you feel that way, sometimes you just take it out, other ways. And I got in trouble at one point. I wasn't doing good in school. I ended up in juvenile hall.
Yeah.
I ended up having to go to a group home, like a placement where you go live. So I went through a lot on the way to becoming an actual fighter in the ring.
Yeah, cool. So, again, I've heard you talk about this really well, about during that abusive relationship that your mum was enduring, that you almost used to bottle up the rage, that you had to try and control it, right? And that's a trait that great fighters have, the ability not to allow their emotions to hijack them.
Oh, I can compartmentalize it. Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us about that.
Well, I don't know in what context you mean, but so if you fast forward to when I was fighting, right? And I remember when I started fighting, everyone's like, oh, she's a pretty girl. Oh, she's Muhammad Ali's daughter. Oh, she can't fight. Oh, she's just in it for publicity, whatever their thought was. But they didn't really realize what I had been through. They didn't realize I had been a fighter all my life. They also underestimated I am Muhammad Ali's daughter. I do have that same, DNA. And I'm also a big girl. I'm a strong girl, a confident girl. And I'm very ambitious, meaning I'm going to do the work. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to be disciplined. I'm going to find the best trainers. You don't want to have to face me in the ring. Trust me, you don't. Yeah. And then on top of that, you have to dig. You have to go somewhere, as your father probably would tell you, and any fighter, because when that heat, comes in that kitchen and you're in there with someone who wants it just as bad as you and is really about who's going to be the best fighter tonight, you got to be able to dig deep somewhere. So for me, I was fueled by a lot. I had a lot of fuel inside of me that I needed. I needed during training. I needed just from my mindset. And I felt fully in control in the ring. And I didn't feel that kind of control anywhere else in my life. Like, I literally stepped in that ring like, I'm going to win this fight, period. It wasn't a maybe. It was 100% I knew. And it was an amazing feeling. And there's never been another feeling like that. That's what I miss about boxing. So I can compartmentalize, and I can do that now, even now. Like, I can put away whatever's going on for a moment, and I can focus all my attention on that. And I had a lot going on even when I was boxing that people didn't realize. I didn't write about that in the book because it hadn't happened yet. Yeah. But I had a lot going on that most fighters wouldn't have been able to deal with and wouldn't have been able to have an undefeated boxing career. I've had some fights that were lackluster. I've had some fights that I looked at like, man, that was horrible. I could have done better, but I still won. But my bar was very high. So I would look at it and be like, man, I fought with the flu. And people would say, man, she didn't have any, her punches were slow and, whatever the case. Yeah, I was fighting with the flu like nobody knew, but I was so confident, I could fight with the flu, but I'm like, what was I doing, So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of stories.
And I want to come and talk about your boxing career in a bit, but there'll be people listening or watching this, Laila, that like, hang on a minute, you went to juvenile hall.
Right.
Which,
wait, rewind.
Let's move. So let's just go back and talk about that period then of, like, because I was interested when I was reading it that you'd said you'd learnt to spot fakes and hucksters and people that were there, and yet what led you into juvenile hall, or what we'd know as like young offenders prison, is the same sort of hucksters and people that had tempted you in and led you down the wrong path?
Well, I led myself down the wrong path, really. I can't really blame anybody else for that. When you're looking for trouble, you're gonna find it. That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. So for me, I made a choice to hang out with certain type of people.
Okay.
And they have a certain lifestyle. You know, I had no business being around those people to begin with, but in my desire to want to find a circle outside of my dad, outside of my other wealthy family's friends, kids.
Yeah.
You know, I ended up going into the hood, you know, hanging around. You know, I had a friend, for example, one day when I first got in trouble, she's like, oh, she's stealing, she's shoplifting. I have money. But here I am, oh, okay. So I try to steal too, and guess what? I get caught, you know? And it was crazy, it was crazy because there was 3 of us, and one of the girls, that's what she did, and the 2 of us, me and my other friend, we just did it just because. And we all got in trouble. And then when we got caught, and you know, we're in the room and they're holding you like they're gonna take you to the police station. They're both crying, boo-hoo. And I'm like, what do you guys? But I'm just like, we knew what we were doing. It wasn't that I wasn't, you know, sorry, like, but I had an attitude about myself. I didn't seem remorseful.
Right.
Well, guess who ended up at the police station? Me. Guess who ended up on probation? Me. They let them go because they were crying and they looked sorry. But everything happens for a reason. And then once I got in trouble, that's when they started looking at everything. Like, wait a minute, your grades really aren't that good. Wait a minute, you got a lot of absences at school, you know, and they realize, okay, something's going on here. And that's kind of how I ended up in the system and going down that path of being removed from my home.
Yeah.
And that's what I needed. That's what I needed at the time.
Which I can imagine you can look back on and recognise. But tell us about that first night then, because it came as a shock when you were first incarcerated.
Yeah, it came as a shock when I went to court that day, and then they were like, you're not going home, and locked me up. And I'm like, looking back at my mom, like, Mom. And then I turned to a little girl again, right? And she's crying, I'm crying, there's nothing she could do. And there's nothing like losing your freedom and that feeling. That right there was enough for me. I had learned my lesson, right? It was real, but I had to go to the county prison, put on their underwear, put on their clothes, be locked up, not knowing, does my mom know where I am? Where am I going? You know, you're just scared, afraid, and, you know.
So that fear that you said that you never had,
I felt fear in them. Oh, yeah,
moment?
absolutely. I felt fear.
What would Laila today say to 15, 16-year-old Laila?
Oh my gosh, there's so much. I would have said slow down. I wanted to grow up so quickly. And a lot of that, again, stemmed from just my childhood, being the experience I had living at home with my mom. I wanted to move out the house. I wanted to be independent. I wanted to be in control. For me, I really wanted to move out, and I had this plan. I wanted to go to school, learn how to do nails, make my own money. And I had Laila's nail studio. By the time I was 18, I had a business. So, and I moved out the house by the time I was 18. I was paying my rent and paying my car note, and I was very proud of myself.
And there was a real parallel there that, again, that I drew between some of the stuff I'd read about your dad's career and yours, which was, like, your dad famously used to make the predictions as to what he was going to do in a fight. And I think the stat was he made 19 public predictions and got 17 of them right, winning in the round and with the punch that he said he'd do. And when I asked Angelo Dundee around that, he'd spoke about this idea that he'd start with the end in mind. So he knew what he wanted, and then training camp was all dictated about how do we achieve that as an outcome. And then when I was reading your story of, like, you had this dream of having your own nail salon at 18 and being independent from quite a young age, didn't you? So would you tell us a little bit about how you go about having that vision for what you want to achieve? And then how do you work back from that to be able to accomplish it?
So first of all, I would never predict rounds. That's like crazy to me. So so much pressure, and I wouldn't want to not get it right. I wouldn't even want to put that pressure on myself because there's so many things can come into play, right? So that took an amazing amount of confidence, an amazing person and fighter to be able to do that, and my dad.
So did you ever ask him why he did do it then?
I didn't, no, I didn't, because when he was still talking, that I just wasn't even into boxing yet at that point, to ask him that. And, It just never came up. But I'm sure someone did. I just didn't. But I had no interest in that. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I think that you set your goal or your dream, whatever it is, and then you set a plan. You don't just hope that it falls in your lap one day. These are things that I already had researched. I was like, okay, what are my options? Lay them out, right? And I'm just saying this off the top of my head because you asked me the question. What are my options? Lay them out. I said, okay, I want to go to beauty school. How am I going to be able to do that? How much does it cost? How many hours does it take? What are the programs? Oh, I can go after school. So I can go while I'm in high school, get on the bus, go across town till 5 to 9 and on Saturdays. Okay, how long is that going to take me? Now I have to be dedicated to do it. But the end is always in my mind. Like, I'm going to get that license and I'm going to make money, and that means independence for me. That's what it was. It wasn't about, I just want to do nails. Do I think I'll be good at it? Yes, because I'm good at anything I apply myself to. But some people say they want something, but they're not willing to do the work that it takes. I don't want to waste time. I don't want to spend 5 months for something that's supposedly going to take a year and then quit. That's 5 months I could have spent doing something else. It's like time is so valuable. People don't realize your time is something you can never get back. The time that you spend thinking negative thoughts, the time that you spend around people who aren't, worth your time, the time you spend scrolling on social media mindlessly and you look up and 2 hours has gone by. And then we say we don't have time when it comes to the time it takes to dedicate ourselves. Like, you could have spent that 2 hours reading a book to educate yourself on something that you say you want to know. You know what I mean? So we really just have to put our priorities in order. And luckily, I learned that at a young age. And what really what was the driving factor was my passion for independence, my passion for being in control. And I think that came from being let down a lot when I was a kid. And I talk about that in my book, feeling like if I have to, I have to do it myself if I want it done right. And not that that's always a great feeling, but there has to be some kind of passion there. And I say that now, even when people are trying to find, what their life's purpose is going to be. What is it that you're passionate about? What is it that has nothing to do with money?
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's something that you really, because it's going to get hard. It's going to get challenging. But what's going to keep, even when it's something I want to give up on, forget it. I come back because I'm like, I can't quit because I love it too much.
So tell us about the ditch then, because you talk about everything has the ditch in it, where things do get tough, where it does get hard and challenging. What have you learned about getting through the ditch?
For me, and that changes, with time. The ditch was different for me when I was younger than it is now. Now I'm 46 years old. I have 2 children. I'm on my second marriage, my last, but my second. So I have some experience under my belt is what I'm saying to you. And now the ditch is just sometimes getting lost in being a mom, just getting caught up in your kids and, not having time all the time for the things that you want to do for yourself. I would say that you have to just know that there is going to be a ditch. There is going to be a challenge, and you just have to know that you can get through it. You're never going to be faced with something harder than you can actually overcome. There's things like that might have happened 3 or 6 months ago in our life. They were like, and now they're like in the past.
Yep.
So I still look past things like this will pass, no matter what it is. Even if it's a death of somebody, like you mourn it, but at the same time, it's like, I'm going to get back to a place where things feel normal again. You have to sometimes just remind yourself that I'm going through something tough right now, but it's going to be okay. Just that energy, that positive mindset, that attitude really helps.
I want to now segue into the nail salon. You achieve your independence, you were successful at it, and then you decide that you've got a family history in the absolute toughest
and the crazy gene
sports.
kicked in.
Yeah. So tell us about the journey that eventually led to you becoming an undefeated world champion.
So I was not an athlete growing up. I already told you, I was bad. I was doing the wrong thing at the wrong time that got myself in trouble. But I got back on track. By the time I was 18, I was living on my own. I was running Layla's nail studio, had clients, was ordering product, managing money, doing all that. And I go to a friend's house to watch a Mike Tyson's fight, and all of a sudden these women come into the ring on the undercard. And I was like, my mouth dropped. I was like, women box? I didn't even know. So I said, oh my God. I was glued to the television. And then they started brawling, and it was a bloody fight, and it was amazing. And I was like, I want to do that. And I remember my friend's dad was like, girl, you're crazy. Those women would take your head off. You're a pretty girl, but you can't fight. And I was just like, he doesn't know me. Like, he doesn't know. My friend was like, Layla, you can do it, because she knew. And I went home that night dreaming about becoming a professional boxer. The way I think things through, like, oh my God, like, first thing I thought was my dad would not like it. I knew that.
Was it? That was your first thought?
Oh yeah, that's one of the first, I would say. I can't say it was my first, but it definitely was in that thought process. Like,
and why do you think he wouldn't like it?
I knew he wouldn't like it because...
You need to hear this, okay? Your gut matters. It's a vital building block to health. Now, you might not know that 70% of your immune system is in your gut. I didn't know that. And 95% of serotonin, which is the feel-good chemical, is created in your gut. And if there's one thing we need more of, it's a feel-good chemical, right? That's why when it came to choosing a probiotic, I had to know it was proven and that I could fully trust it. And this is it. Biotic by Heights, specifically formulated to give you everything you need for your gut, your mind, and your immune system. I take it every day, and the difference for me is real. And you could trust me, fine, cool, or you could trust the tens of thousands of high performers and elite athletes that rely on Biotic every day. So join tens of thousands of high performers and try Heights with an exclusive 20% off your first month, only with this podcast. Go to heights.com/HP or enter the code HP20 at checkout. You'll love it.
Number one, nobody in our family, okay, I'm the youngest girl, okay, of 9 children. I'm the last born. He has one adopted son who's younger, but I'm the last of his natural born children, a girl. No one had been boxing. No one was a boxer. No one talked about, Daddy was the known person, the boxer in the family. So that wasn't even something was talked about. And then women's boxing, like my dad was Muslim. I'm not, but my dad was very strict. Just to be wearing a sports bra and shorts and showing all that skin is gonna be something, then to be fighting, coming into his arena, as a public person, I'm his baby girl. He's not gonna like that, I know that. So, but that wasn't something I was like, okay, I did a lot of things he didn't like. And I was like, okay, we're gonna put another one on the list, Dad. So that was, but I knew that, okay? But then just the fact that I didn't know what it'd be like to be an athlete. I didn't play any sports growing up. What would it take? What would people say? But the biggest thought was all of this time and planning I've spent building my nail salon, wanting to, start a chain of salons. How am I gonna just turn my back on that? That was the thing, because I told you, I stick with it. So I was just like, So I talked myself out of it. And about a year later, I decided I was gonna go, I decided I was gonna go to the gym and start training. I was like, let me see if I have what it takes, because I didn't want to embarrass myself. I didn't want to embarrass my father. I was aware, okay, of how enormous this would be if Muhammad Ali's daughter started boxing. So I had to take care with this, right? So I went to the gym and started training every night after school, after work, and fell in love with boxing. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna do it. And the trainer was like, oh yeah, you have what it takes. He was gonna tell me that anyway, because he saw the opportunity. But I felt that I did also. And I started sparring, and I saw like, okay, I got speed, I have power, I'm learning quickly. So if the news eventually got around to my dad, because people talk, especially when I started sparring. It's like, wait a minute, you're not just working out. Because up until then I had said I was just working out. I was keeping it. I wanted to make sure that I really want to do this, because I knew that the floodgates were going to open, and there was going to be a lot of naysayers and people trying to talk me out of it. I had to be strong, So I said, okay, I'm ready. So when my dad came in town and asked me about it, I said, yeah, it's true. Yeah, what you heard is true. I've been training. And he was like, and it got really serious. And he had his Parkinson, so his hand's shaking, and you could tell he's getting upset, and we're sitting here just like this. And he says, well, do you know how hard it's gonna be? Like, do you realize how much pressure is going to be on you? And I said, yeah, I thought about this and I'm going to do it. But of course, it's like you're telling your kids something, you think they just don't get it. Like I'm telling him, he's like, she has no idea what I'm talking about. He paints the picture, like in a ring with all these lights shining down on you and a crowd around you chanting and you're getting in the ring. Like, do you realize how much pressure will be on you? I'm like, yeah, I do. And then he says, well, what's going to happen if you get, knocked down? I was like, then I'm going to get back up, just like you did. And he just really gets really frustrated because his indirectly trying to talk me out of it, his reverse psychology, bringing up all the negative things wasn't working. So he finally just said, it's not for you. It's not for women. I don't want you to do it. I'm against it. And I just say, well, Dad, I respect how you feel, but I've already made my decision and I'm going to do it regardless. So you're either going to be there or you're not. Either way, I'm going to do it. So that's how we left it.
Right.
And he publicly was honest. He wasn't happy with it, but he supported me. He didn't say anything super negative. He wasn't going to pretend he liked it.
Yeah.
But he came to my fights. Not all of them, because he had Parkinson's, he had his schedule, and it was fine. And one thing I never did was count on him to be there. I didn't count on anybody to be there because to me that's a weakness. That's how I saw it. I don't have space and time for those kind of emotions. All I have time is that person in front of me. So if you're there, great. I'll see you after the fight. If you're not there, okay, I'll see you after the fight. Either way, I'm going in this ring and I'm gonna do what I have to do. So, like, that was the thing. Every fighter is different. Every fighter is like, okay, some fighters want people in the dressing room, some don't. Some fighters will do interviews before a fight, some don't. I didn't want people in my dressing room. I didn't want to do interviews before a fight.
Yeah. I
didn't want any of that because I'm very focused and I have my ritual of like what I like to do. So
tell us, Laila, that I'm always intrigued when you're in the dressing room of a fighter because it's the loneliest place in the world. And there's that old saying, isn't there, that a fight is never won on the walk to the ring, but it can be lost. And I'm interested in what would you have been saying to yourself that you talk about control as an important element before you go out there for that first fight? Like, even though it's a small hall show, you've still got the world's media turning up.
Oh yeah, every fight was big for me.
Yeah, to feature in it. So you're on a tightrope where you can fall quite a long way here. What would you be saying to yourself before you left that dressing room to make your way to the ring?
I always just remember thinking, this is it. This is the moment. This is what you wanted. You got it. Like I'm a tough love kind of person with other people too. I'm a straight talk kind of person, and like you made your bed, lay in it. This is how I talk to my friends, my girlfriends that are crying about a certain guy. I told you about him and you chose him and I'm not gonna like, wait a minute. I'm the same way with myself. So I look myself in the mirror and say, okay, it's time to do it. You back it up, go out there and do it. So I felt really empowered. I felt really strong. I didn't get nervous in the dressing room. Everyone gets butterflies leading up to the fight, but in the day of the fight, the day I'm in the room and I'm wrapping my hands and I'm focused, like all the butterflies are gone. I just really looking forward to that moment. And again, I look towards the end of the fight. I'm like looking around. I'm gonna be back in this room in about 20, 30 minutes. Eating that cake. I always had a cake. Like,
did you?
Oh yeah, because I've dieted down. I've deprived myself, and I'll be right back for you. We're gonna go home early. We're gonna go get the knockout. So yeah, I think everyone had different thoughts, but I like to stay really focused. Like when I was walking to the ring, I never looked into the audience. I never looked in people's eyes. I always kind of kept my head down. If I looked at anything, it was usually my opponent across the ring from me. I kind of keep my eyes locked on them. I'm not like, hey, everybody's here. I never did any of that.
And did you ever pick your dad's brain to go, like, give me some tips for this? Like how?
I didn't. It's funny because back then, as foolish as it may sound to somebody listening, I was so adamant about not being like my dad,
right,
that I didn't want to know. It didn't matter to me,
Yeah.
And it's because I remember, are you gonna do the rope-a-dope, Laila? Are you gonna call rounds? I'm like, I'm not Muhammad Ali, I'm Laila Ali. I don't want to do those things.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do those things. That's his thing, And it's not something that you just, first of all, I'm just proud that at a young age, I knew that if I ever start trying to be like my dad, I'm never gonna be able to stop. I'm not coming out to try to be like my dad.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna talk about my dad every single time I fight. I'm not gonna compare my style to my dad's every single time that I fight. I'm not gonna allow you to put on a TV package just about my dad. Yes, I'm Muhammad Ali's daughter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when it came to certain things, like fighting styles, we're different.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? I can sit now and say, yeah, we had things in common, but I'm talking about back then.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going back in time. Like I have no problem now talking to you about my dad, but back then I was so focused on my own career and I had to make that distinction.
Yeah.
Because everybody was trying to make it something else. They're gonna talk about that I'm Muhammad Ali's daughter anyway. I don't need to sit here and talk to you about it when I'm about to fight. That opponent is fighting Laila Ali, not Muhammad Ali.
Sure, and I get that, and I can empathise. Like in the UK, people always refer to me as my father's son, so you're Brian's son.
And I don't mind. Yeah. I am proud of who my dad is, but also because I've created my own lane.
Yes, of course.
Even if people don't know me here, I've created my own lane outside of my father. You know, so I'm very proud of who I am and what I've done outside of boxing even, you know? So for me, it's okay. Like I really have no problem talking about my dad. It's just that back then when it was time to box, I wasn't like, Dad, what did you do? Because I want to do it too. But you could sit here and say, well, but you could ask Muhammad Ali. Any fighter would want to ask, but I was so adamant because of what was going on at that time. You know what I mean? And remember, my dad didn't really support what I was doing. So I had to figure a lot out on my own. It wasn't like he was like, this is my daughter, give her the best of everything.
Yeah.
Best trainers, best this. I went into this world on my own and had to figure it out on my own. My dad had nothing to do with my boxing career.
But what I suppose I was inquiring about, and I think you might have answered it, Laila, is that I'll give you a really simple example. I remember my dad when I was a kid and he'd be in the dressing room and he always used to say, watch the feet. And you'd say, what do you mean? And he'd say, well, often when somebody's nervous, the only way that the adrenaline can escape is through their foot tapping away. So yeah, I often say that to coaches now, that just watch the feet so you can get a sense of how people are really feeling, that you might look confident.
That's why your foot's been tapping this whole interview?
I'm just joking.
Yeah. I'm just messing with you.
But was there ever any sort of like little insider tricks like that? So not necessarily saying boxing the way I did, but anything about the sport or being able to overcome an opponent that he'd say, look for this or what's
my dad, my dad, I told you that he said, don't box, it's not for you. He did come back to me and apologized and said, I want to talk to you. I was like, oh God, now what? What are we going to talk about this time?
And how many fights in was this?
Man, I had won a world title, at least one by then. So,
right, okay.
Yeah, so I was a world champion. And he says, I was wrong. You can fight. And women can fight, and I'm proud of you. And he started crying, and I started crying. My dad cried all the time. I'm sure you probably heard, so that wasn't a big deal. But he was so emotional, and we both got emotional because I had told myself, I don't care what he thinks. I'm gonna do this without him. Forget him. But I cared.
Yeah.
That's my dad, and he's the greatest of all time. Of course, I want his respect. I want his respect, and I want him to tell me, yeah, you can box, you can fight, girl. And I'm proud of you. So for him to say, you move around like me, you move like me, you jab like me, and we're like crying and, he's got his Parkinson, he's shaking, and he couldn't deny, what he sees. Obviously, I'm not at the level of my dad, right? But we're built the same and our style was similar because of our build, right? Long arms, long legs, speed, power, agility, all these different things. So then that's when he said, you gotta jab. Like every fighter has their thing, right? That they always say. And he says, you gotta jab, you gotta hit the speed, you gotta hit the heavy bag as if a fly is on it. And you're trying to hit it before.
Brilliant.
Yeah, because if you think about, that's the kind of speed, because when you get that visual, no, that's not fast enough. That's not fast enough to hit a fly. You gotta, you know what I mean? You gotta snap it. You gotta snap it.
Yeah.
So, and I just said it to someone that I know that is fighting. And I was like, I need you to bring your speed up, because he sent me some tape of him fighting and he looked slower than I think he should. And then it's one thing to say, bring your speed. I said, this is what my dad told me. He's like, thank you, I'm gonna use that. Now he's imagining that fly on the bag. Now don't do that when you're in the ring with a fighter. You do it when you're practicing, and then it flows naturally. As with anything, do it when you're by yourself working, and then when you go out and round other people, and it's gonna flow for you, right? After you do it enough times.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so that was big though.
Oh, I love that.
That was big because the jab is the most underrated and most important weapon in boxing.
Yep.
If you have a good jab, everything else comes behind that. It sets everything up. If you have someone looking for your jab, and worried about your jab, it makes the fight much easier.
Yeah, especially for your reach as well.
And he saw I wasn't using my jab enough.
Right.
Because I wasn't. Because I'm a fighter. I like to fight. My dad was more of a boxer. I don't mind like mixing it up, and getting on the inside, whereas my dad, it's smarter to box though. It's smarter to use your jab. You have your reach, So he was giving me some good advice.
And that leads me then to ask you about the Karen Bills fight, because that was the first time where you got put down.
It's the only time I got knocked down.
Yeah. So, and because that's often the sign of, all the qualities you said about the courage, the guts, the authenticity. That's where you really see somebody at their true character. What did you learn about getting put down on the canvas?
Oh man, well, first of all, I can literally look at the tape and see what I was doing wrong. And it was something that I had been told in the gym many times that I didn't fix.
Right.
She was throwing wild punches, just wild. She was strong, but she was throwing wild punches. And I just put my hands up and I was blocking them. Well, I just stayed there like that. So after seeing that for a while, she came up the middle.
Right.
And then I just dropped. And it was like a flash knockdown. I got right back up.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was hurt, and I looked at my corner and they're like, because they didn't know, what's she gonna do now? Because they never see that until you actually show them. I wasn't experienced enough yet to know how to box and move.
Yeah.
But I knew how to fight and I was confident in my fighting. So in that moment, I was like, oh, it's time to fight because this is a mental thing. And that's where you see the heart. That was a good learning experience for me. Obviously, I went back to the gym and fixed that, But it also taught me that I'm tough, because I remember at the end, everyone was like, you got knocked down, you got back up. I was like, what? I got knocked down? So I did have some kind of concussion because I didn't remember. I was like, oh yeah, I did, but I did not remember. So something happened in there,
And you made a comment there, Laila, about it is mental. So you finish your career as an undefeated world champion. So when you reflect back on it, how much of your success do you think is down to the mental side of the sport and how much of it is down to the physical gifts?
Oh, so much. It's really hard to say. I think that in my experience, I was just unbeatable. Those poor girls, they never had a chance. No, I'm just kidding. Because I had it all. No. I would say that the physical side is really important. Obviously, being an athlete is, being trained and having the right trainers. Because I see fighters a lot of the time that I'm like, man, if only they would just do this, and they just don't fix it, right? The mindset, it's like you can be a really good fighter, you could be a perfect physical specimen, have all the right trainers, have everything, but you don't have the mind and you don't have the heart. It just takes that right fighter to come to expose that and get into the ring with you and show everybody. Because a lot of times, if you're somebody who's marketable, for example, and people have high hopes for you, they're gonna put you in fights that they're confident you can win, right? Because you want to keep your record to a certain point and learn. Like I learned in the ring. I didn't have an amateur background. I learned under the lights. So of course my handlers, my first few fights, okay, let's make sure she can handle this, because I could say I'm going to be tough, but they want to see for themselves. But at a certain point, you got to fight real fights, especially if you want titles. You can't win world titles by fighting, Yeah. So I think that it takes a little bit of everything. I think for me, like I said, I had the confidence is amazing. The mindset, because in my situation, being Muhammad Ali's daughter, going into boxing with all the criticism that was against me, it was more criticism than positivity.
Was it?
Oh, absolutely. When I was fighting, absolutely, 100%. Now, I can sit here and have these interviews and people respect. But back then, it was just kind of like, they didn't respect women's boxing.
Yeah.
It wasn't in the Olympics yet. It still isn't huge, but I'm saying it wasn't even where it is now. It was a new sport. People just weren't comfortable with it.
Yeah.
They didn't believe that I would just want to be a boxer. But you could be an actress, but you could be this, you could be that. It's like, why do you want to box? Most people that are boxers because they can't do anything else, or they came from a bad neighborhood, or that's what they thought.
Yeah.
So I didn't fit the bill for them. The girls that were boxing, that had been boxing for so many years and weren't getting attention, had animosity towards me. They fought me 10 times harder. So like, if you're just thudding along, working a day job as a waitress and having some fights, and you know trying to make ends meet, you're gonna get really inspired if someone tells you beat Laila Ali and you're gonna become a millionaire, even whether it's true or not.
Yeah.
They had extra oomph, when everybody fought me harder, So I always had to come with my A game. Even though I didn't, even if I was at 60%, a lot of the times I would still be able to win. Yeah.
And I'm always intrigued in your story that you spoke about having the right trainer and you sought out different trainers, including you went to the Mayweather Gym in Vegas, where it was Roger that trained you initially, wasn't it?
Yeah, at the time there was no Mayweather Gym. So I went to Vegas, started training with Roger Mayweather. I actually opened a gym in Vegas and he started training me at my gym.
Right, okay.
But at the time he trained at a gym called Top Rank.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, before
Bob
Mayweather
Barham.
had his own gym,
Yeah.
So Floyd Jr. used to train at Top Rank, yeah.
Right, okay. So what was that like in terms of
Amazing.
So what did you learn from them that
So
you feel
Roger was
distinguished?
one of my favorite trainers, I would say. And Roger, the main thing I would say, taught me my punch count and speed went up. Because, the Mayweather's like, blah, 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 you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You throw all these different combinations.
Yeah.
So I remember having to take a year off for shoulder surgery. And then when I came back, my first fight back, I was throwing so many punches that at the time my husband was like, hey, now you need to slow down. It's just too many. It's not enough power on them. It was great, but we had to find balance.
Okay.
But yeah, Mayweather was a great trainer in that sense. And, I learned a lot through Paddy, because Paddy had a good watchful eye. He paid attention to detail, and he knew my strengths and my weaknesses, and he would fine tune. Whereas Roger may just be like, let's do the mitts. Okay, go do the heavy bag. Paddy come over to the heavy bag and watch me. And don't just hit the heavy bag. I need you to do X, Y, and Z. So, I had so many different parts to my team that, helped make me amazing in the ring,
And what do you feel makes a good coach?
I think that you just have to know how to get to the person that you're talking to. First of all, you have to be intelligent. You have to be knowledgeable, right, in whatever it is. We're talking about boxing, right? For me, I wanted a coach that had done it themselves. Like, for me, I respected Roger as a world champion fighter.
Yeah.
I respected Buddy McGirt as a world champion fighter. So they have done this before. They've seen everything that I'm gonna see. They know how I feel, they know what I'm going through, right? They've worked with other world champion fighters. So that level was great. But at the same time, you have to really know how to alter. So I think for a coach, you can't coach everybody the same way. You can't say the same thing to get that feedback out of each person. You gotta know what makes them tick. I just remember we were talking about Roger and we were talking about boxing, and I just remember coming back to the corner and, him telling me, why it's important too, just having those eyes in the corner, like, she's ready to go.
Right.
Like, she's already ready to go. So he knew that I had a third gear and a fourth gear.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So, and I always saved a little bit. So for someone to tell me that with confidence, and I know this is someone who watches me and is with me and sees my hardest days training with guys in the gym, and he says she's ready to go, then I'm like, okay, let me go out there. So that made a difference.
I think it's an appropriate time, given the title of this podcast is High Performance, as somebody that did go through your career undefeated, what is your definition of high performance?
Oh man, so much can be said, but just being at your best, and just firing all engines, and constantly looking to improve, constantly looking to be more efficient in your life. To be efficient and to be at your best means you have to be open-minded, right? You have to be willing to make changes when things aren't working, or, what worked for me at 40 may not work for me at 50,
Yeah.
right? And that's just an example. So for me, that's what I'm always doing. That's what life is about. Because some people do go through life stagnant, just kind of like, oh, I'm just gonna go to work and just kind of take life how it comes.
Yeah.
I can't imagine living that way.
What do you think your dad would have said if he was here and we asked him the question of what is high performance?
He probably would have said something similar, but at the same time, I would think that, and I don't like answering for my dad, but I would think that, he probably would have done some things differently maybe when it comes to his own health and wellness.
Yeah.
My dad lived the life that he wanted to live. He said early on that boxing he loved, but it was going to be his platform for his humanitarian work. He believed that he needed the Rolex and he needed the Rolls Royce to get people's attention. But then he was going to spread his message, and he stayed true to that. He stayed, even through his Parkinson's, he still traveled the world. He still was shaking hands. He was still freeing hostages. He was still a strong voice, and he didn't try to hide, right? Even though he couldn't speak anymore, he still made that connection with people. So he lived his life fully. But I think that he, at the same time, was always trying to be at his best. And his definition of his best was different in that, he wanted to do his humanitarian work.
Yeah.
It took an incredible amount of energy
Yeah.
and dedication for him to continue doing that with Parkinson's disease. He could have easily sat down and relaxed, and people would have been okay with that, but he didn't. So I think that was him trying to be his best, to keep pushing, to keep, to stay true to what he said that it was that he wanted to do, and he wasn't going to let anything stop him.
I think you've touched on something there that is like a really underrated virtue that I think about when you mention your dad, especially the latter end of his life, of the courage it took to still go out there in public when the Parkinson's disease had started to really take effect. How did it feel for you as his daughter, seeing him vulnerable and still putting himself out there?
It was hard to see him sick, and it was hard to see him suffer. It wasn't so much about putting himself out there, because I grew up with the same type of values, and mindset and vibe around all of that as my dad. I didn't really care about really what the public thought, but just seeing him and knowing how it must have felt as a man to not have that control over your body anymore.
Yeah.
For your body to shut down on you. His mind's still there, but his mouth isn't moving or working or stiffening up on him, or he can't chew anymore. And just when he got to the point where he had to wear a bib and need help eating, it's hard.
Sure.
Need help, going to the restroom for a man such as himself. Anyone that gets sick, and has to depend on other people, is very humbling. So that was tough, but I also know that's a part of life that we go through as human beings, and we're gonna deteriorate, all of us, at some point or the other. So as long as you can, keep your mind right and still be a happy person inside, the better. So that's why, I still felt good knowing that he felt happy. He was happy with himself. If he was no longer happy, then I wouldn't want, him to be dealing with it any longer. But when he passed, I did feel like, he's free again. He's free from this body that had deteriorated, and he's free being his amazing self, in heaven or wherever he is. So, that was what gave me peace in knowing he's not suffering anymore,
Sure, I can empathise with that. Like my dad passed away a couple of years ago when he had dementia.
Oh.
That some of that was exacerbated by boxing. Did you ever feel that Parkinson's was a result of the career that he'd chosen?
I think it might have had something to do with it, but so many people have Parkinson's and never boxed.
Sure.
So it's really hard to say. My father, I remember my father thought he had pesticides poisoning from fruit. I remember he's always saying, wash your fruit, wash your fruit. He's obsessed with that. Because, they put pesticides and things on the fruit that cause issues, and heavy metals and all these different things going on our body. So a lot of the illnesses have a lot to do with environmental issues. So who knows? Yeah. But I know that a lot of people have Parkinson's that didn't box. But I think that even if he didn't have Parkinson's, he probably would have had some effects from boxing.
And what do you think he was put on the earth to do?
To uplift a lot of people, You know, I mean, I can't tell you how many people I have met that are like, come to me in tears about how much they love my father just because of a stand that he took to show them that you can stand up for what you believe in, that you can speak for so many different people. You know, when he was fighting for his rights and fighting for the rights of so many, when he refused to go to the war to stand for his religion, for a religion that a lot of people didn't respect. Muslims around the world have so much respect for him. You know, it's like, even though I'm not Muslim, I understand, why it was such a big thing. You know, when he changed his last name, when he got everything stripped from him, you know, and had to go and speak at colleges and just to take care of his family. And he was having death threats, and that, you know, the government was following him. I mean, so many different things were going on that people don't realize, in his life. But he's 9 kids. I got sisters in all the major states. I'm like New York, Philadelphia, California.
You're all over.
I'm all over. What does that tell you? So I'm just saying, and a lot of people probably in his shoes might have been in the same situation if they had all the beautiful women in the world throwing themselves at them. They weren't in that, didn't have that opportunity to see if they could stand to it or not.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. But I won't let who my dad was define me.
Yep.
I won't let what I've been through in the past define me. Like, we have to all decide what is going to define our life. What is our own legacy going to be? And even if you don't know, it's like you wake up every day and you do the right thing. You do what you know is right, right?
Yeah.
Like when we learn, maybe everyone didn't learn this. My dad used to tell us, God is always watching you. Even when you think no one else is around. A lot of people do things when they think no one's watching.
Yeah.
But if you think, okay, that's how I grew up thinking, like, there's never a time to do the wrong thing. There never is. Never. So, it's like I don't really have to worry about heaven or hell or right or wrong. I'm gonna do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. That's how I live my life. That's how I teach my children. Imagine how much of a better world we would live in if everybody would just do the right thing.
What a brilliant way to end this fascinating conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Like that. Thank you for doing this. We normally finish up with some quick-fire questions.
Are they about me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah, as long as they're about me, it's not trivia, it's not about stuff I'm not going to be able to remember.
Oh, no,
Okay.
no.
Yeah,
Sorry.
okay.
So we'll go through the quick-fire round. But what are the 3 non-negotiable behaviours that you and everyone around you buys into?
You have to be authentic, you have to be honest, and you have to be kind.
If you could go back to one moment of your life, what would it be and why?
One moment? There's so many. I gotta pick just one. Probably back to when I was a little girl, and I just felt like I just had to grow up quick and I had to solve all the problems of everyone around me. It was a tremendous amount of pressure to put on yourself and weight to carry that I just didn't get to have that childhood. So that, I would say, slow down. It's okay. Slow down. Just be a child. Focus on you. Focus on now.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received and why?
I remember my dad telling me and us when we were younger, never step on anybody to get ahead. Never step on others to get ahead. And I didn't know what it meant back then. But that's something that I wouldn't necessarily say it. I probably have gotten better advice, but that stuck with me because, again, it just goes back to, not trying to dim someone else's light to make yours shine brighter, to help someone along, just this whole concept of helping others, being a good person. All that is instilled in me so deeply. And it's so important to me. It's more important than business advice that I've gotten or advice on how to make money or, all these different things. Just the core of being a good person to the core. So
how important is legacy to you?
It's important to the extent of, I think about what I will leave behind. I think about, especially being a public person. Like when you write about me in the history books, when they do a documentary on me, what is it gonna say? Who was I? How was I different than anybody? Did I make a difference on this earth while I was here? To me, it's important to leave this place better than it was when I got here. I don't want to be someone who just passed through.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you have to be a celebrity. It doesn't mean you have to be a public person. There's people who, I like to use the example of my father because people know who my father is, right? And he's this young boy from Louisville, Kentucky, who came from modest parents. His mom was a housekeeper, his dad was a painter, right? And some boys stole his bike, and that's how he got into boxing. The local boxing trainer was like, young man, he's like, I'm gonna get them, I'm gonna fight them. He's like, well, do you know how to fight? And he's like, come into this gym, the amateur training. But he really just wanted to get him off the street so he wouldn't get in trouble. That man had no idea that this was gonna be the next Muhammad Ali. But we don't write about him and his name and, necessarily who he was. But, you can make an impact in your community by helping a child that can become the next Muhammad Ali. Every piece of the puzzle is just as important. So we don't want to diminish the importance of the roles. Everybody has their piece and they're all just as important.
So what would you want people to say about you?
Oh man, I think they're already saying it.
Which is?
That I'm confident, that I'm strong. I think you think strength. That was important to me ever since I was a child.
Yeah.
And that, my friends will say that I'm loyal, I'm authentic, I'm a good business person, I'm a great mom, I'm a wonderful wife, I'm a good friend, I was a wonderful daughter to my dad. Those are the things. And I think it's okay to say positive things about yourself. If you're someone who thinks, oh, who she thinks she is, well, maybe you need to lift yourself up a little more because you should be okay with that. And if you don't feel like you have anything positive to say, then put in the work. Put in the work so you can feel good about yourself and just be honest. You know what I'm saying?
So my final question, Laila, is what is your one golden rule for living a high-performance life?
I mean, for me, honestly, and I hardly ever say the word honestly because I'm always being honest. But to give you the real, for me, it's about being able to accept criticism when I know it's something I need to fix. So, because I'm so strong, sometimes I get into that, no, this is how it is, and it takes certain, like my husband.
Yeah.
My husband's that person that sometimes he'll put that mirror up and it'll piss me off at first, it'll piss me off and I'm like, he's right, and I know he's right. And I'm like, okay, I gotta work on this because I'm wrong, So it takes a lot of, strength to be able to do that. So for me, it's really, like I said, being able to accept criticism, some of the hardest things that you may not want to face and be willing to change. That's the one thing, is being able to accept the tough criticisms and be willing to make an improvement. So always being open, always being open. Even when you're great, even when you're amazing, even when you've got lots of successes, you're not perfect. You're not perfect.
I love that. But this has been an amazing interview, so thank you so much for coming and sharing so generously with us.
Well, thanks for having me on.